Hello. Today I'd like to talk about some remaining questions which might have come to your attention when thinking about the Keystone lectures, just to iron a few things out. The question today was going to be, if God created the world in the structure which we described in the very first lecture, about that we should be givers. The world is a place essentially which is barren of God's presence, and the job of us, who are really the souls, is to bring in God's light into the body and into the physical world, and to change the world from a reality which seems to be, which is for the time being evil and dark and lacking of spirituality and God's presence, and we're converting it by every time we do an action, and we actually make it a more holy place filled with God's presence and His light. So why don't we see that happening? So the obvious answer is because God, wants to give us free will, so He doesn't let that happen. So what exactly is going on? Where do we see? Why don't we see? What technically is God doing to stop us experiencing what's really happening, and how does that relate to the world to come? So we're going to have a look at the difference between this world and the next world. So let's go into the structure of the reality, how God creates the world, and we'll see the hierarchy of everything, and we'll see exactly what God is doing in order to give us free will in the meantime. This is going to be more technical. It's going to be much more simple. It's not so abstract, this lecture, as the previous ones are, but it's going to be more technical, just describing exactly what's going on. And then we'll see a very nice idea at the end, connected with what the world to come is, what the experience of the world to come is in a bit more detail, and some amazing ideas to do with time. So let's hope we get through all of it in good time. Right. Okay, so let's start off with the structure of reality. As we said, that before anything starts, you've just got God, the reality of God, whatever that is, which we don't have any access to, as we spoke about in the second Keystone lecture. Then God does the second part of the two God dimensions, where God reveals. So first of all, he makes something else which we perceive as a new thing. He makes a sort of like a space for things to exist which don't get totally overwhelmed with God's oneness. So now you've got a place where something else can exist. Then God creates the lenses through which He communicates with us, which are His attributes, His attribute of mercy, His desire, His kindness, His justice, etc. In Hebrew we call them midos, attributes, just like we have attributes because we're created in God's image. So we are sort of a reflection of what's going on up there, just a much more earthy, crude copy, sort of. Bit like you've got a DNA code and you've got a person at the end of it. The DNA code is something very, very abstract, you can't see much in it, but it's a blueprint for what comes later, which is a whole physical human being with all the different parts. But the code itself, or a computer code for a program, right? The computer program code is just ones and zeros when you come down to it. It's very, very abstract, very hard to understand. But once things develop, you get a very complex functioning program. So that's how God is doing it. He takes these attributes to express Himself, to relate to us, and that filters down. Eventually it comes down to the physical level, this light gets diminished, it becomes more physical. So at the source it's still much more spiritual, but as it goes through many, many filters, eventually at the bottom we've got the physical world, right? And on the way, you've got God, you've got the space for everything else to exist in. Then within that space, God creates his attributes. Then the next level is actually the human soul, which is extremely high in creation. It's the next thing. Then you've got the spiritual worlds afterwards. I'm speaking loosely here, which are the ones which people understand spiritual worlds as in like where the angels are, where the different energies which create the physical world are, and eventually you get the world of matter and physicality at the end, which is our visible universe. And of course, within this universe, you've got both aspects. You've got the physical world and the physical body, but of course, you've got the spiritual energy, which is keeping it in existence. And in terms of the body, you've got the soul, which is within the body, which is trying to become a channel to bring the light of God into the body and by extension into the world. So why don't we experience that? So whenever we do good action, we do charity, we do any of the commandments, we are bringing God into the world. So why don't we experience that? There is a Midrash. I'm not going to go into it too much. It's part of the Torah, the oral Torah, which is the one which you've got the written Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, and you've got the prophets, and you've got the Kesuvim, the writings, so the 24 books of the Tanakh. But then, besides that, there was, before God actually gave us all the written one, he gave us rules of how to understand and how to derive and to interpret the written Torah, which is called the oral Torah, which is actually given earlier than the written Torah. That's what we actually got at Sinai. We got the 10 Commandments at Sinai, plus we got all these rules and ways of understanding the Torah. And then at the end of the 40 years, we actually got a written version, and the two combined together. So part of the oral law is something called Midrash, where the rabbis use certain methods to derive things from the verses. And one Midrash says like this, that God created on the 5th day, he created the 2 Taninim HaGadolim, the 2 big fish. Okay, very cryptic, and he saw that if he would let them multiply and become fruitful, they'll fill up the whole world, they'll destroy the world. So therefore he neutered the male and he killed the female, and the female is meant to be left for the future as a feast for the righteous. Okay, very, very interesting graphic sort of story there. But as we know, the Midrash is, whether it's meant to be understood on the literal level or not, it's definitely meant to be telling us something spiritual, a spiritual hidden meaning. Usually the rule is the stranger the story sounds, the deeper the ideas are, because the rabbis wanted to make sure that only people who are fitting would understand the deep ideas. So the idea of the Leviathan, this fish, Leviathan has got another meaning. It comes from the word levaya, which means to accompany or to connect. So on one level, the Leviathan actually represents our connection with God. So when we speak about God seeing that if the Leviathan, which means the connection with God, multiplies, it will destroy the world. Why? Because this world has to be a world where there's free will. And if this connection with God through people's actions would just increase and multiply, this person does a good action, this person does a good action, this person's bringing God into the world, then God will be coming in so intensely with every single action we do, it will destroy the whole world. The whole world, which is meant to be temporarily a world of balance where we've got free will, it will be just destroyed. There wouldn't be any free will anymore. God's presence would just illuminate the world, and there wouldn't be any free will left. That's the idea. So the idea of neutering it and slaughtering it, I saw a beautiful idea Why did he neuter the male and slaughter the female? There's two aspects to our bringing God into the world. We've got the spiritual way of doing it and the physical way of doing it. The spiritual ways corresponds to the male, and the physical way of bringing God in is corresponding to the female. The female Leviathan, the female fish or whale, whatever you want to call it. Sea serpent, I think that's one translation. So the spiritual way of bringing God into the world is by using the mind, specifically studying the Torah. Whenever we learn Torah, we're actually bringing God into the world through our minds, through our thinking about God, through our awareness of God. That brings God into the world that way. There's another way of doing it by doing physical actions, and this involves the body more now. That means we actually give charity, we smile at someone. Yeah, I'm making you all happy now with my lovely smile, right? Yeah, got a free mitzvah there. That's good, right? Or by doing the ritual commandments like taking the lulav, shaking the lulav, the palm branches on the sukkahs, or by eating food on the Sabbath, right? Sanctifying the Sabbath with the kiddush, with a cup of wine, the bread, and then having the nice meal, right? Or putting on the tzitzis, things to do with our body, or the tefillin, the straps we put around the arms and on the head to remind us of God, or the mezuzah we put on our doors. Right, the scrolls which speak about the oneness of God, the Shema, like we mentioned in one of our previous lectures. So any of these physical actions bring God into the world through something physical, whereas the Torah, studying Torah, is something which is purely intellectual. There is an aspect of physicality, because when you study the Torah, you're meant to say the words. Therefore, the mouth is kind of physical, even though it is quite a spiritual aspect of the body. It's still slightly physical. So that way we bring the Torah in to the physical world through speaking. However, the essence of what studying the Torah is it's an intellectual thing. So that corresponds to, like, we've got everything. We've always got dichotomies in the world. You've got male and female. You've got spiritual, physical. You've got intellectual and practical. So here, the slaughtering of the Leviathan is slaughtering, or the neutering, or the castrating of the male Leviathan, is referring to bringing God into the world through the intellectual side. That means studying Torah. God didn't destroy, He didn't kill that off. That means that when we study Torah, we do experience the light of Hashem coming in, which is when the person studies, they do feel uplifted, they do feel, in a sense, they do feel the light which they're bringing in, but very, very faintly, because it can't multiply. They just get a tiny bit in, and then that's it. However, when it comes to the practical mitzvahs, the practical commandments, when we actually do physical action, we don't feel any spiritual feeling when we do the good. Yeah, we might know intellectually we're being good people and we feel good because, at the end of the day you are being good. It feels good to be good. But that actual experience of what you have just done by bringing God into your body, when I give the coin to the poor person, I should really be feeling infinite pleasure in my hand. That's what should really be happening. And in truth, that is what's happening, but we're going to explain it in this lecture, exactly what's happening. But we don't experience it now because, as we say, the reason why God doesn't let that happen is in order that we have free will. Imagine if you gave one coin of charity to a poor person, then you just felt infinite pleasure in your hand. You're going to be going to the bank, getting all the money out and just giving. You just want to feel that amazing product of you giving infinite pleasure to the body. So you'd just be doing that over and over again. You wouldn't have any free will left. Right? So God slaughters the female, representing the physical aspect of the Leviathan, of the fish, which really means the connection with us. So he slaughters that so we don't feel it at all, it's dead, but we're going to eat it. The righteous are going to eat it in the future. What does that mean? That means we're going to enjoy that connection which we created in the next world. That's the idea. And when it comes to studying Torah, this is a beautiful thing about Torah. That's why there's so many verses in Tehillim, in Psalms, which speaks about the beauty and the sweetness of the Torah. Yeah, it's referring to this. Is that studying Torah, only someone who's actually done it can really appreciate it. It's like, wow, it's amazing. You don't understand why it feels so good. Yeah, it's intellectually challenging, stimulating, but there's something else behind it which is really, it's hard to describe. It's sort of like a very subtle sort of feeling of like, I feel really good. I feel good as in holy. It's very, very amazing idea. But that's because God doesn't slaughter the male Leviathan. That connection, which is coming from the male side, that means the spiritual side, God doesn't slaughter it. All he does is neuters it. It can't multiply and proliferate. So if we think about some ideas in Torah, the idea would be that the spiritual comes in, and as we keep going, it will multiply and get bigger, 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 bigger. So what God does is he limits it. He doesn't let it build on itself and multiply. Yeah, you learn a bit of Torah, for that moment you've got that experience. Fine. Next time you learn another word of Torah, you get another experience, but it doesn't build on itself. It doesn't multiply. But as we say, the idea is that we're going to experience it in the next world. Okay. So that is the idea of what God actually does to stop us experiencing what we're doing. So the question is, so what are we actually doing? Does it mean that we do the actions here and God sort of like separates it and puts it in the next world? Or are we actually doing something now? We see when we're learning Torah, it's clear from that explanation we just gave, that the actual studying Torah, we're experiencing bringing God into the body right now. It's just on a very limited level. So really, that should theoretically be happening on the physical level as well when we do the commandments. So what exactly happens in the next world? Because surely this should all be happening in this world. So what's the idea of the next world? So we must have mentioned this a few times in passing, but now we're going to go into it in detail. The idea of the world to come is where we start bridging the gap between the physical and the spiritual, and we get closer to God. But this doesn't work necessarily in the timeline which we're speaking about. There is an end to time, but then time changes. So we're going to explain what this means. So there's a Jewish idea of Techiyas HaMeisim, the resurrection of the dead. Okay, so we all understand on one level, this is true as well. There's different stages to this. So one level is a physical level, where people who have died, the righteous, get resurrected and they walk on the earth again and they live forever. That's the idea. Right. But there's another aspect of Techiyas HaMeisim, the resurrection of the dead. If you think about it, every moment of time we're dying. As soon as a baby is born, it's starting to die. Yeah. At the moment of birth, it's got the whole future ahead of it. It's got like, let's say 120 years, as we say, yeah? As soon as it's lived 1 year, 120th of it is dead. Because that year it's experienced, it's gone. It's not coming back. We'll see it's not so straightforward. But that year is gone. It's dead. And it's still got 119 years left of life. And then it becomes a bit more dead, a bit more dead, a bit more dead, a bit depressing, this, isn't it? right? The longer we go through life, the more we're dying. So 50% dead, 60, 80, 99%. Eventually, when a person actually dies, he's 100% dead, because all his moments of life have finished, are all in the past. They've all died, they're finished. And as we said, that while we were alive, all our good actions, let's focus on the good actions. We can understand how the bad actions play as well. Maybe we'll touch on that as well. But the idea is every moment of time, we're bringing God into the world, into our body and into the world. And as we said, we don't experience it. But the truth is, at this point in time when you're doing good action, you are actually bringing God into the world and into your body. And your body and your soul both become infinite givers, like we spoke about in the first lecture. But we don't feel it yet, because that moment died. As soon as you do the action, it's in the past, and we go on to the next moment. Techias Amesim, resurrection of the dead, is God takes all those dead points in time throughout a person's life, and he gives them life again. He gives life to not just your body, but the life which you've lived and has died. He replays the video, so to speak. Go rewind to the beginning and press play again. But the difference is now, when we experience every action which we do, now God doesn't do this killing of the Leviathan. He doesn't. What was previously hidden, the result of our actions, of us bringing God into our bodies, is no longer hidden. We actually start to experience that infinite pleasure which we did during our life. But it's not what we did past tense. We're doing it now because we're reliving those moments. We become, if you think about it, it's like we're writing a story or something like that, right? And everything is fixed. This moment's fixed now. That's fixed. Did we do the right thing here? Good. That's fixed. Now we relive every moment of our life. And every time we do something good, we don't have the free will anymore because we've done it already. But in the replay, we actually, this is the bit where I'm going to do something really amazing. I'm going to give the charity to the poor person, and smile at him and do it in a clever way where he doesn't even feel embarrassed. So I did an amazing good deed there. And you give it, yes, give it, and you feel that pleasure burning in a good way. Yeah, the energy pulsating through the hand. And the smile, you feel your smile lighting up with the divine energy, whatever part of your body you were using, right? And the more excited, the more happy you were to do the commandment, your heart starts to feel the pleasure of bringing God into your emotions, because you did it with the right emotions. Everything you can use to bring God into the world. It's not just the physical action; it's the emotions, the thoughts, everything. So that's what Techias Amesim is on this level. God resurrects those dead points in time and gives them life again. And then a person experiences what he actually did. So don't think of it as you got this world and then you get your reward in the next world. It doesn't work like that. The reward is this world, but this world on a new level of awareness, what this world really is. God just removes the barrier, so to speak. Right. So if you think about, so how does it work? Do we constantly live through our life from beginning to end, and then we just go back and forward, backwards, forwards? No, it goes even more deeper, and this ties up with the idea of becoming more similar to God. Because remember, every moment of time, that's plurality. You've got many points of time. That means you're fragmented into billions and trillions of moments of time, and trillions of choices which you make, and trillions of bringing God into your being and into the world. So what happens is, is God makes your whole life into one entity. All right, so let's explain this with a metaphor. So this is R Dessler, one of the great sages, very deep philosophers, Jewish philosophers who lived about less than 100 years ago. It's actually a teacher of my teacher. He said this amazing, very, very genius martial analogy or metaphor. Imagine you've got a map of the world, right? And then you take a piece of card and you cut a small hole out of that piece of card, and then you place the card on top of the map. Then you move the card so the hole hovers over different places in the world. So let's start from the east. So first of all, it hovers over Tokyo in Japan. Then you move it slightly to the left. Then you've got Beijing in China. Then you move it a bit further. You've got Moscow. Then you move it more sort of southwest. You go over Jerusalem. And then you move it even more. Then you go to Paris. Then to London. And then eventually across the Atlantic Ocean, you go to New York. Okay. Fine. So there was a sequence to that. Yeah, one before the other. So if I'd ask what came first, Jerusalem or London, you said Jerusalem was first. What was first, Tokyo or Moscow? Tokyo was first. Okay, very good. Now take that card, remove it. Now you're just left with the map. Now what's first, Tokyo or Moscow? What's first? The answer is there's no first or last. It's all there in one go. You've got Tokyo, you've got New York, you've got Jerusalem, Moscow, everything all there, all at the same time. There isn't any first or last anymore. You're just seeing the whole picture. That is what happens in the world to come. Instead of us experiencing each moment separately, the reason why it's like that, because we've got lots of choices to make, so we have to God breaks up our life into millions of different points so we can do millions of choices to bring God in different actions. But once it's done, there's no need for that anymore. So time, instead of being a timeline going from past to future, you've got the whole of time, a person's whole life, or the whole time of from the creation to the end of it, all becomes one thing. And instead of traveling linearly, sort of like chronologically, the whole of time itself travels closer to God. So time kind of has a new meaning now. You've got the whole of time, but you're going through a new dimension, which is the dimension of good and evil, let's call it, where you got good is tending towards God and the evil's towards the physical world. So basically the whole physical world starts getting more spiritual. The whole of time, all 6,000 years, from the beginning to the end, all starts getting more spiritual. And it starts to get closer to God. So what's really going on? Let's think about this even deeper now. Remember, God is above time, right? So what we're doing now, are in time. But after the resurrection of the dead process, time all becomes one thing. But yet we're still not with God 100%. But the process of the world to come is you're taking this and you're connecting it more and more with God. Eventually what you're doing is you're taking something which is within time and within process, within process, I guess that's the correct word. You've got a process going from one end, traveling up. Now, we're not going from past to future, we're going from physical to spiritual. You're taking that world of finiteness and you're bringing it into the infinite realm. Now this is one very deep thing which you have to think about, very abstract idea of this lecture. How do we become like God? Becoming itself is a contradiction to God, because God doesn't become, right? God can't change, but we clearly are changing. The idea is that we had a beginning, right? Things which start should have an end, because they're time bound. But the secret to the world to come is that because we are absorbing God's light and we're experiencing God's light, we are becoming similar to God, so therefore we are starting to become timeless. That idea, time completely changes when you get to these spiritual worlds and you start to experience your reality as infinite, which is similar to God. We're taking time. Time is something, as we explained, which is in this world, and we're making it timeless. We're making it, there's no beginning, no end. It's all just one thing, our whole life. But then we're doing this with all these different worlds as well. We've got the physical world, then collapses into the spiritual world where the angels are, and eventually that goes higher and higher into the world where the root of our souls are. But then that goes even higher, it transcends more and more. And the whole universe, not just the world of time, becomes just one blob, so to speak, but all those different universes themselves, they become one. And eventually everything starts going back to the source, to that place where God started the creation from. Right? Everything goes up. But because it's infinite, there's an infinite number of levels, so therefore it goes on forever, so to speak. But we get closer and closer and closer to God, and we start to feel the reality of God. And remember, this is all experiencing the actions which we did in this world. Right? We're experiencing us constantly giving to our body, us constantly bringing God into the physical world, right? And through all the worlds, because the light comes all the way from the top all the way to the bottom. So we're experiencing that amazing light which we brought in, and everything comes back up to the source. That's an amazing idea. That's the idea of the reward of the world to come. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the experience of us bringing God into ourselves. And the truth is, it's not something separate from our actions. It is us bringing it in. We experience ourselves bringing that infinite pleasure to our body. Us bringing the infinite pleasure to the world of time. Us bringing infinite time, that means something which is above time, we're bringing it into time itself. Wow. Spoke about bringing the soul into the body. We're bringing above timeness we're bringing timelessness into time. Time itself is becoming timeless. Right? In this parallel, time is like the body. Timelessness is the soul. So we're even transforming time itself. Everything changes. Everything goes back and becomes more unified. Time, by definition, is different points. Timelessness means, no, it's just a oneness. So we're bringing that oneness, which is coming from God, into the world of time. That's what we're doing. It's an incredible idea. It's a beautiful idea. When you really appreciate it, you feel so, wow. That is, you compare that, okay, I don't want to get controversial here, but compare that to the perception of the world to come of many other religions, up there on a cloud, or other religions have other things which we won't mention. Their idea, very physical. It's just, they're missing everything. They're just missing everything. It is, once you experience this knowledge, what the world to come really is, this level of infinite pleasure of just God and above timeless, and us becoming timeless, and us becoming very similar to God, according to our perception anyway, Obviously, we can't be exactly like God, but in all different facets, God's engineered things where we become extremely similar to Him. And that is the 13th of the 13 fundamentals of faith, that God resurrects the dead. We think, yeah, what's the big deal if He resurrects the dead or not? As long as we get to the world to come, that's the main thing. So no, you have to understand the resurrection of the dead tells us this point, the idea that God's not just giving us an independent reward. The reward is actually what we do, us giving to our bodies. We are experiencing this moment, the pleasure of the world to come. It's just we don't realize it yet. God will reveal to us later when He replays our life that we are experiencing the world to come now on all the levels until the infinite level. It's happening right now, in this point in time. It's an incredible one. The more you realize that now, the more you're already starting the process to happen now on that level as well. It's just a beautiful idea. Yeah, I could speak about this for hours. It's such a perfect system. It really is. Only God can make such a perfect system because it's just so perfect. It's just, however you look at it, it's just the perfect way. Yeah. All right. I'm not really saying anything anymore, but maybe that's the purpose. It's just that we're going to experience us not being able to say anything. Is there anything else we need to tie up here? Let's check on my notes here. So let's wrap up. So we spoke about how God structures the world. We've got God at the top, then He breaks up the world into parts and to become more physical. Until you've got the body and the physical world, the actual physical world, and the world of time, where you've got parts, you've got moments of time. Then the idea is that each moment of time we're bringing God in this moment, that moment, that moment. Then God, at the end, He doesn't let us feel what we're actually doing, but once we've gone through the whole process, God now takes away the card which is covering the map, so to speak. He takes away this barrier which stops us experiencing what we're actually doing. Yeah, He releases the Leviathan. Oh, that sounds good, right? And then we can actually experience that connection. Whenever we think about Torah, we experience the male aspect of the connection with God. And when we do physical actions, we experience the female aspect of God. We feast on the Leviathan. That means we have the pleasure of that connection with God. We take the whole of time, the fragmented world of time, and we bring it up until time becomes timeless. Then we become permanent. The world becomes permanent. The world becomes timeless. Right? The whole process is not a process anymore. It just is. But that goes on forever because God's infinitely greater than everything. So we can always get closer, but it's a constant process of getting more pleasure, more infinite pleasure, infinitely more pleasure from one moment to the other. But it's not really moments. It's time works differently there. Right, there is one question though. What happens if we don't do the right thing? So what happens is that, let's say, God forbid, we have a moment where we do something bad, or we don't do what we're meant to be doing. That's the experience of we say, gehinom or hell. That suffering, that experience of the emptiness of what we could have brought in. When you know what that infinite pleasure is, and then you see it's right there and you didn't take it, there's no greater pain for a soul than to experience what it could have had and what it just lost. And that's why we describe it as burning. It's not a physical fire. It's much worse than a physical fire. But the best thing we can describe in this world, to give us a glimpse in our physical bodies of something which is just something unbearable, is fire. Fire is something which just destroys a person. A person can cut themselves. That's painful, but they're still there, right? But the experience of fire in this world, it's I don't know, maybe it's the scariest feeling, because you feel everything, the whole body just disintegrating and just burning up, just disappearing. That's the experience of when we replay the video, and that moment, instead of getting reality and being in touch with reality, we cut ourselves off from reality, from God, and we experience the void of non-existence. That is extremely painful. And we've got no way of understanding what that is, because we're in a physical body, so therefore we use physical metaphors to try helping us to understand that. But as we explained in the third lecture, I think, about Gilui Yichud, God's oneness, I think it was that one, that through the suffering itself, we reveal the truth about God, that there isn't any other power besides God, that I thought I had power to rebel against God, and now the person who's suffering in hell, or whatever you want to call it, gehinom, he's experienced that intense pain and suffering, and he wants to get out of it, and he can't. So that reveals that who's the real one in charge, who's the only real power. It's God, not me. I've got no power. Person in hell, he's absolutely stuck, and only God can get him out of that, by God coming in and revealing himself. Right? There's not discussion exactly how that works. I might not go into that now. That's much more technical, I think. Yeah, the idea of experiencing the shame, the contradiction of what God's trying to give you, but you don't want it because you don't deserve it, because you're not similar to God in that moment in time. So God trying to give you, but it doesn't work. So it just burns a person up. That's the shame. But once a person goes through that process, and he reveals through his suffering that the only reality is God, that's the experience of the world to come. That's experience which we're aiming for. Everything is God. So through his suffering, he starts to appreciate God, and he brings God into his reality, not through free choice, granted, so it's not ideal, but he brings God in through that way, and then he starts feeling the pleasure of being close to God, because he did bring God into the world and into the body. He just did it in a very painful, circuitous route. Yeah, that's why it's always better to do the good thing, because it's much quicker, much easier. But the truth is, at the end of the day, that moment of time now has been flipped from darkness to light, because even those few moments of time where the person didn't bring the light in, now through the suffering and the shame, or the whatever it is, he's brought God into those moments of time. And once they're fixed, then we look at the whole timeline of the person's life. So it's all light now. Every single moment of time, he's brought God in, either by doing the right thing or by doing the wrong thing, but he repented and he got to a high level of recognition within his lifetime, which retroactively reveals that that moment of darkness is actually a cause for light, which brings God's light in for that moment in time, retroactively, or retroactively through the suffering in the next world. So in the end, a person's life lights up, he's complete, he's brought God's light into every single moment of time of his existence, and then he goes through this process of going closer to God. Okay, I hope that was eye-opening, inspiring hopefully as well, and hopefully you get a much bigger picture about what's really going on now. So we're speaking about all these theoretical things. Every time we're doing an action, we're bringing God into the world. The answer is yes, we are, and now you understand why we're not feeling it. Or at least when we do physical actions, we don't feel it, but when we do the intellectual commandments, especially the studying of the Torah, we do experience it, but on a limited level. And now we understand the idea of the resurrection of the dead, why it's such a fundamental, right? Of course, there's a physical resurrection of the dead as well, right? But it's a whole process. First of all, the people are going to get resurrected physically, and then they're in a very, very advanced spiritual state, and eventually they start, because they're still within time now, the resurrection happens within time, but then eventually you've got another aspect of the resurrection where the whole of time gets resurrected retroactively, and everything starts becoming very spiritual and infinite. Okay, thanks for listening. We'll leave it there, and I hope you enjoyed that, and look forward to having you on the next lecture. All the best. Bye for now.